Okay, so let's talk about internalized fascist tendencies that many of us unfortunately have. And it's not the case of, oh, you lefties see fascism in everything you don't like. Unfortunately, a lot of these things we may even like and enjoy and think of them as completely natural and normal. But once you start noticing the patterns, once you start learning the material history of humankind, then it becomes quite apparent to you that these are not your personal choices. And the myth of individualism actually made our lives so much worse by convincing us that we somehow make our decisions in some kind of vacuum, and we are these independent agents, when in fact it is the ideology that is guiding our ways always. And when we become aware of them, this is when we get a chance to change some of these patterns that we may not actually want. And some of these very common internalized fascist tendencies are when you are very rigid about certain rules and certain laws, maybe not legally so, but when you believe that things should be a certain way, this is the normal way of life. And it includes ableism, fat phobia, transphobia, homophobia. All of these are phobias for a reason. They're phobias because we may unconsciously be afraid of things that are different, that are not exactly the same as what we're used to. But why are we used to things being a certain way? Well, because the media has to serve the ruling ideology. Otherwise, it's going to be pushed out of the market. It's not going to be profitable. Therefore, the media has to align itself with the status quo ideology in order to push certain narratives. And it happens, as I usually say, naturally. No one is necessarily planning for the media to be a certain way. No one is necessarily planning for clothing items to be a certain way. This is actually the opposite of capitalist production. Capitalist production doesn't plan anything. Centralized planning is kind of opposed to the chaos of capitalist markets. Even though some of the elements of planning are now being implemented in some economies, capitalist economies, it is still not exactly the same as the communist planned economy would be, because in communist planned economy, we pursue the fulfillment of the needs of the people, and not necessarily our own preconceived ideals of what these needs are. This planned economy is going to be based on the actual necessity, the actual need, but that is a whole other conversation. So going back to the normalcy and normalizing certain things, every single thing that is about gender, that is about presentation, behavior, this is most likely going to have some tendencies towards fascism in the modern world, because they're all about control. When something is about controlling you as a person, about how you act, how you speak, how you behave, what kind of choices you make in your day-to-day life, if it's all about control, then most likely it is fascist in nature. Why? Well, because for capitalism to dominate over us and over our minds and over our daily lives, it has to leave us with as little free time as possible. So our time instead becomes utilized. And this is something that I already talked about, which I've been reminded of by Marina Budik's work, A Virtualized World of Capitalism, which I keep on recommending, but it is unfortunately not available in any languages except for Russian. But she does talk about the vast importance of free time that we should use to govern over our own fates. But instead, nowadays, what we are provided with is utilized time. So utilized time is when you actually spend your time consuming something, be it product, media, whatever. And in the process of doing so, you actually groom yourself into becoming this perfect consumer. You become much more narrow-minded, much less curious, because you see certain narratives repeated over and over again. You see certain patterns repeated over and over again, and they become very normal to you. It becomes very normal to you, the way people appear, the way people act and behave, and it is all done, again, not to indoctrinate you to become a little drone. It is done solely for a purpose to be able to produce more and more goods and sell more and more goods. That's it. It is the only purpose of capitalism, is to increase value indefinitely, which is impossible to do on a planet with a finite resources, but it is not an evil agenda of some reptile people. It simply boils down to the fact that when you are consuming media that promotes some kind of consumption once again, then you're going to just be stuck in the cycle of consuming and going to work and earning money and spending money on things and products and activities that you otherwise may not even want to engage in. And there is no bad or good activities. No activity inherently is bad or fascist. Some activities may cease to be later when the economic conditions change to suit the needs of the people. We may engage in some activities less just because we won't need to fill that void deep within us. We won't need to compensate or overcompensate for certain aspects of our lives that have not been fulfilled because of capitalism. But claiming that some activities are inherently bad or harmful are very, very common. Again, fascist tropes, because they want to convince you, the people who are very, very afraid, that's why they become fascists, they want to convince everyone else surrounding them that their way of thinking and their rigid patterns of behavior are the norm, and anything outside of that norm is dangerous. That is what they want to convince us all of. And this is something that arises naturally out of not understanding what's happening around you. This is a fear response, just as I keep insisting. Fascism is a fear response. It is when humans are so confused about what's happening. They're so afraid, and all they see is all of these power structures that are not serving them. They're serving some kind of unknown agenda that appears to be very ambiguous and strange, and there is no rhyme or reason that you can't understand. So you need to explain this mess to yourself. So this is when all the phobias started appearing. This is when a lot of fascist tendencies started appearing. And I already mentioned some of these tendencies. Any kind of phobias really may lead to this kind of exclusionary thinking where you notice something or somebody not exerting the qualities you are used to, and then immediately you deem this as dangerous, as possibly harmful, and you spin that narrative in your head to exaggerate it, to justify and rationalize why your way of thinking is actually correct and why these people or these objects are actually dangerous. And of course, if you watch BreadTube, if you've watched BreadTube for any amount of time, you will be aware of some great examples. For example, Sean made some amazing videos talking about J.K. Rowling and how she has gone down that pipeline. And a lot of the other creators too, they have made a ton of videos showcasing, using examples, concrete examples from real world, not some made up examples, about how people may accidentally stumble into fascism, because it is very normal to develop a lot of protective mechanisms in a world like we live in today, because again, capitalist production is not interested in fulfilling our needs, in helping us understand the world around us. It is only interested in ever increasing profits, and upon its way it's going to destroy anything that's good and beautiful and human. And this is what it has been doing, and this is why the world is the way it is today. So looking internally and examining your own fears and coming to an understanding that being afraid of something is normal. However, acting upon fear-born impulses is not, because it may lead potentially to you ostracizing yourself, pushing aside all the people who may actually be able to help you, who actually have the same interests as you do. So sitting down and having a hard look in the mirror may really be helpful in understanding that we all have these internalized tendencies. That doesn't make us fascists. That only makes us people who are vulnerable to the outside influences and can only be studied through a dialectical materialist lens. And when you start doing this internal work yourself, you will see that it's not actually inherent to you. You don't have to do a lot of overcoming in order to stop viewing other people through this fear-fueled lens. And it is so much easier. Your life actually becomes so much easier when you realize that you have much more in common with other people than you were taught to believe, and that cooperating with other people may be much easier than you anticipated, because there's no some inherent difference amongst us. We are 99.9% similar, even genetically, so it is not as hard for us to cooperate as we think. And looking at yourself and and thoroughly examining yourself is always going to be helpful. Of course, overthinking and ruminating is different. So if you're interested in talking more about this, let me know. If you want some concrete examples, let me know. But I think there are a ton of examples in the media done by people who are much more eloquent and well-spoken than I am. So I don't really see the necessity to keep on giving people examples. But if you haven't been exposed to those, look around BreadTube, go check out PhilosophyTube, Sean, ContraPoints, even H-Bomber Guy, who is one of my favorite people on this earth, even though he doesn't necessarily do left kind of content, but you can kind of see the underpinnings in his reviews and media analysis. And let me know what you think overall. I hope you have a great day today. Consider supporting me on Patreon. Do take care of yourself and your community first. Subscribe to me on all the social medias, even though I don't do much there. And I'll talk to you sometime later.